Shabbat Shalom. Now, at this time of year, we will often proclaim, as we're playing dreidel, Nes Gadol Haya Sham, a great miracle happened there in reference to Hanukkah more than 2,000 years ago. I think we can safely say now, and in this season, Nes Gadol Haya Po, a great miracle is happening here, right now. Now, what is the great miracle to which I'm referring? Of course, it is to the fact that the television show West Wing is on both Netflix and HBO Max at exactly the same time. There's a God, friends. What this means is for a wingnut like me, yes, that's what you call people who are passionately into the television show West Wing, we're wingnuts. It means I can watch West Wing on HBO Max from the very first episode and go forward, while at the exact same time on Netflix, starting with the very last episode and working backward. Nes Gadol Haya Po. It's truly a miraculous time in which we live. Now, I believe with fullness of spirit that everything we need to know about the world, we can learn from West Wing. It's true. And I'll just give you one small example. In one of the best episodes, it tells us that the White House is just like the synagogue. How, you might ask? In the White House, they're led by the president. In the synagogue, we're led by the president. The White House has a communications director that brings all of the messages of the White House together to speak one unified voice out to the world. The synagogue also has a communications director that takes all of our voices, puts it into one message, and communicates it out to exactly the one we need to hear our message. And here and there in the West Wing, it doesn't always resemble the truth or give us the best advice. For example, we learn from the West Wing that a good writer borrows, but a great writer steals straight out. We also learn from the West Wing, what do you call a Jew from Connecticut? There's a special name for a Jew from Connecticut, according to the West Wing. We call him a Presbyterian. The other thing that we learned from watching the West Wing, which may not be entirely true in our own world, which is that the smartest, kindest, fairest individuals are the ones who are elected to public office. It might not happen in our own time that the smartest, kindest, and fairest people are the ones elected to public office. Now, of course, speaking much more to the real world comes our Torah. And in particular, our Parashat this week, Parashat Vayeishev, about which David spoke to us so beautifully. And I'll invite you, if you want, to turn with me in your Eitz Chaim Chumashim, your red book, to this week's Torah portion. I'm on page 226. Page 226, we learn from chapter 37 of the book of Genesis. Now Jacob was settled in the land where his father had sojourned, the land of Canaan. This then is the line of Jacob. And it begins to tell us the story of Joseph. At 17 years of age, the Torah tells us Joseph tended the flocks with his brothers as a helper to the sons of his father's wife, Bilhah and Zilpah. And Joseph brought bad reports of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph best of all his sons, for he was the child of his old age, and he made him an ornamented tunic. Now, what could possibly go wrong when a father loves one son more than all the other sons? But here we begin to unpack and to understand their world. At 17, it wasn't just that Joseph was tending to the flocks of his brothers. It was that Joseph, the son of one mother, became the assistant shepherd under the shepherding of his brothers, who were the children of another mother. There was, in that moment, almost a tribalism taking place. where one set of brothers lorded their authority over another brother. And the Torah continues. Joseph brought bad reports of his brothers to their father. Joseph is a little arrogant. And Joseph, because of his arrogance, sees the immorality of his brothers, and he rats them out to dad. Now, you want to talk about a way not to get in good with your brothers. You wouldn't know anything about this, David. Is to rat your siblings out to your parents. But that's exactly what happens here. And then we learn, now Israel, that is Jacob, loved Joseph best of all of his sons. For Joseph was the child of Jacob's old age. And so Jacob made for Joseph an ornamented tunic. If you look at the Hebrew, a more direct translation is actually an amazing Technicolor dream coat. That's what the Torah says right here. The brothers hated Joseph so that they could not speak a friendly word to him. And we'll come to see this language multiple times now in the continuation of our text, that the brothers were so angry that they actually hated Joseph. That's what the Torah tells us right there. Now, why did the brothers hate Joseph so much? We saw first and foremost, of course, that Joseph was ratting them out to their father. Joseph knew right from wrong. And because of Joseph's morality, he was complaining about the immoral ones to his father in an effort to make the world a better place. Joseph, while arrogant, was still seeking to bring right and wrong to light. Joseph was still seeking to remove immorality from his world. And there's something else interesting that we learn. When it says that Jacob loved Joseph even more, because Joseph was the child of Jacob's old age, what our rabbis come to tell us in the Torah is that that's not exactly what's being communicated. It's not that Joseph is the child of Jacob's old age. It's that Joseph sat at the foot of the elders, and Joseph learned. Joseph was brilliant. Joseph was a student of Torah. He was a student of the world. And because of Joseph's intellectual accomplishments, the brothers hated him. Because of Joseph's intellectual accomplishments, Jacob allowed Joseph to advance far beyond his brothers. And because of Joseph's intellectual accomplishments, the brothers grew jealous of Joseph. And we know, and I don't mean to spoil the end of the story for you, but you may have heard it already. Because of Joseph's gifts, ultimately Pharaoh will make Joseph the second in command over the most powerful country of the ancient world. Because of Joseph's intellectual gifts and his spiritual leadership, Joseph becomes incredibly powerful at the end of our book of Genesis. Merit achieves incredible power, but merit often doesn't achieve incredible popularity. And as I was studying this Parashat and I began thinking about our own world, as we look around, what we hear and what we see might be called the death of the meritocracy. In the United States of America, it seems to me, and inaugurated some 60 years ago with the incredible "I Have a Dream" speech of Dr. Martin Luther King, we transformed from a country and maybe even a world in which heredity dictated who got to prosper and who got to lead. We began to transform from a time when race and religion were the most important factors for leadership and for prosperity. And when Dr. King reminded us that it's each and every person who will be judged by the content of their character, that this country, and this country as a leader of the world, began to transform into a meritocracy, where people who are the brightest and the most skilled can achieve, where people who are the most learned can prosper, And in that moment, I think the United States set forward on a half a century of meritocracy. And our country prospered incredibly. And we know in that half century, the Jews prospered incredibly. Because in any society that is committed to learning as its fundamental premise for who gets to take over leadership and who gets to prosper, we Jews did really well in America. But over the last 10 or 15 years, I might suggest that this meritocracy that the Jews prospered in so significantly, this meritocracy that the United States prospered from so significantly, began to transform. And what we see now, what we've seen over the last decade or so, are people who are trying to say, no, it's not the most learned who should be leading. No, it's not the most learned who should be achieving. But they're trying to once again ask us to look at race and ethnic identity, even sexual identity, as the factors that should allow people to accelerate. We're also in the midst of a time in the last 10 or 15 years where it's no longer the most learned, the most intellectual, or even the most skilled who get to prosper and move forward, but it's those who might be willing to check mind and morality at the door in the name of fealty to a political party or an elected official. Over the last 10 to 15 years, in my eyes, this meritocracy has begun to fade. And I think, too, we're also entering a period, or we have entered a period, in which ideological purity becomes a test for who gets to advance in this world. And all of this has led to challenges for the Jews, because we know among those examples of the ideological purity that on the right and the left they're asking for is anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. In a world where meritocracy no longer is valued, the Jews suffer. In a world where ideological purity is preferred over knowledge and skills, the Jews suffer. And in a world where other races and ethnicities are promoted and the Jews are left behind, the Jews suffer. And I think, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, but as I see it, I see a resemblance to exactly what's happening in our Torah portion this week. Joseph sat at the feet of the elders and learned and became skillful. And so Jacob helped him to advance. But two things happened. Joseph grew arrogant from his merit, and the brothers grew jealous from Joseph's advancement. Is that where we've been in the last decade or so? Those of us who've advanced through society because of meritocracy have become arrogant, and too many others have been left behind because they don't understand, they don't see the keys to the kingdom. They don't see how the path forward can be achieved. And I wonder, too, if that has caused the jealousy in the world that we see around us. A jealousy causing the Jews to suffer here in America, the Jews to suffer in Europe, and Israel to be criticized over and over again in the Middle East. Are they jealous? Are we arrogant? I look forward to this conversation and continuing this conversation with you over the course of the morning and in the coming days. The blessings and the challenges of this meritocracy that helped America to succeed, that helped the Jewish people to succeed, that seems now to be fading into history. Now, everything we need to know in life, we can learn from the West Wing. And one of the great lines, as Caleb reminded me of last night, because not only am I a wingnut, I'm raising wingnuts. It's not the battles that we lose that bother me. It's the battles that we don't even suit up for that upset me? How can we begin to transform our society again into the words that Dr. King tried to remind us, that each and every person should be judged by the content of their character, by their wisdom and their knowledge and their skills, each and every individual, not because of their race or ethnic identity, not because of their fealty to an elected official or a political party, but because of who they are, because of what they know and what they're able to accomplish. We know eventually Joseph takes over as second in command of all of Egypt. We know that ultimately the brothers will reunite. And what is the secret to Joseph's success? What is the secret at the end of Genesis to bringing family back together? It's a commitment to faith. It's a commitment to justice. It's a commitment to fairness and compassion. And it's a commitment to allowing everyone to achieve in their own way and helping those who struggle to achieve as well. Adonai oz yamo yitain, Adonai yivarechet amo v'shalom. May God grant us the strength to do what is good and what is right in this world. And may God bless us all with peace. And let us say together, Amen, Shabbat Shalom.